They told me my father died when I was 2. No photos, no gravesite. Just a quiet lie whispered in the corner of my childhood. He was a good man, they said, but he's gone. Don't ask. So I didn't. For 25 years, I buried the questions, until a simple ancestry test cracked everything open. And at Thanksgiving dinner, with 3 generations sitting around the table, I placed a DNA report next to the turkey and asked my mother one question: who is Peter Sloan? The room went silent. My uncle dropped his fork. My mother's face turned white. Because Peter Sloan wasn't a ghost. He was alive. He was never told about me. And he wasn't the man they claimed had died. They didn't just hide my father. They erased him. And for 25 years, they let me believe I came from nothing, when the truth was sitting just one state away. What would you do if your family hid your real identity from you for decades? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace or tear the silence wide open? Comment your truth below. Subscribe to EN Reddit. Story for raw, real stories of betrayal, family secrets, and the kind of healing that starts with one brutal question. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 28 years old, a registered nurse in Boston. I work night shifts, drink way too much coffee, and up until recently, I thought I knew who I was. I grew up believing my father had died before I could remember him. My mom, Linda, always spoke of him vaguely. He was a good man, she'd say. He served. He passed too soon. It's better not to dwell. I didn't question it. What little girl wants to believe her mom would lie? When I was 5, she married James, my stepfather, though I was told to just call him Dad. James was strict, old-fashioned, and never really warmed toward me. We weren't close. He paid the bills, showed up to school plays, and never raised his voice, but also never said I love you. Looking back, there was always a quiet wall between us, like we were playing roles, and I never got the full script. My cousin Ben, who practically grew up in the same house, used to say I had old soul energy. And maybe that's why I noticed what others didn't. How people went silent when I asked too much. How there were no photos of me as a baby with my dad. How family stories never really included him, but I was taught not to press. So I didn't until I did. It started innocently, a DNA kit that came with a discount code and a colleague's encouragement. We'd had a patient come in whose unknown medical history had complicated their treatment. I thought maybe I should know more about mine. At first, it was just curiosity. I spit in the tube, mailed it off, and forgot about it. 6 weeks later, the results arrived, and everything unraveled. The ethnicity estimate didn't match what I'd always been told. There were no genetic links to James or anyone on his side of the family, and one suggested relative stood out like a beacon: Peter Sloan. The site said we shared enough DNA to be immediate family, possibly a parent. I stared at the screen, refreshed the page, checked it again. There it was. Parent-child match, 98% probability. Name: Peter Sloan, age 54, location: Portland, Maine. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a shock, it was a split down the middle of my identity. Who was Peter Sloan? Why had I never heard his name? And what the hell had my family been hiding? I didn't tell anyone about the DNA results. Not at first. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even Ben, who I usually told everything to. Because something told me that this wasn't just a mistake in the database. This was deliberate. And I needed to find out how deep the lie went before I confronted anyone I started with. Peter Sloan. His profile on the Ancestry site didn't have much, just his name, age, and location. Portland, Maine. But Google gave me more. Peter Sloan, 54, former military medic. Now a volunteer EMT and part-time wilderness guide in Acadia National Park. Married, once divorced. No listed children. No criminal record. No signs of trouble. Just a quiet man who, as far as I could tell, had no idea I existed. And the deeper I dug, the more painful the truth became. Peter had been stationed at a base outside Boston the year before I was born. There were newspaper clippings of local events, fundraisers, a volunteer health drive. One photo had him shaking hands with community organizers, and right next to him in the background was my mother, Linda, smiling. I zoomed in so far the image pixelated, but there was no denying it. She was there with him. So much for he died before you were born. I felt sick. Over the next few weeks, I built a quiet archive, clipping screenshots, a printed family tree from the DNA site, all the pieces they thought I'd never find. And the more I pieced it together, the angrier I got. Not just at the lie, but at the choice they made. They didn't tell me he died to protect me. They told me he died to erase him, because it was easier to raise a child in silence than to deal with the complications of truth. But they underestimated one thing. I became a nurse, which means I don't flinch at hard truths. I confront them, and I was done living in their version of my life. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away, and as invitations went out and the family chat started buzzing about pies and sides and seating charts, I made a decision. This would be the year I brought a different kind of dish to the table. Not stuffing, not cranberry sauce, but a sealed manila envelope labeled, "For the family inside." My DNA results, my questions, and one name written in red marker. Peter Sloan. Thanksgiving at the Carter house was always a production. 15 people, 2 tables pushed together. China no one used any other day of the year. Roasted turkey, sweet potato casserole, green beans with too much butter, and attention that didn't belong to any recipe. This year I showed up with a pie and a manila envelope. Ben greeted me at the door. He looked the same as always, relaxed, warm, but I could tell something was off. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I already knew that everything was about to change. Dinner went on as usual, mouths full, stories repeated. My mother kept looking across the table at me as if sensing something. James barely acknowledged me, too busy talking about football stats and the state of the country. When dessert was about to be served, I stood up. "Before we bring out the pie," I said calmly, "I have something I need to share." The room fell quiet. Forks hovered, chairs creaked. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope, set it down in front of my mother, looked her directly in the eyes. "His name is Peter Sloan." Her face drained of color. Ben looked up, confused. James froze. Aunt Marie whispered, "Oh my God." I opened the envelope, pulled out the printed DNA results, held them up. "He's not dead. He's not a ghost. And he's not James. He's my biological father, and he never even knew I existed." My mother's lip trembled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. James cleared his throat. "This isn't the time or the place." "No," I said, "it's exactly the time. Because I've spent 25 years at this table being lied to, and I think I've earned 5 minutes of truth." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth was heavy enough to land like thunder without shouting. Ben leaned in. "Wait, are you serious?" I nodded. "I found him. He's real. He's alive." And he didn't walk away. He was pushed out by you two. I pointed at my mother, then James. "You decided it would be easier if I believed he was dead, so you erased him. You buried the truth and gave me silence. But silence doesn't mean safety. It means control." Linda finally spoke, soft, brittle. We thought we were doing the right thing." "You mean the easy thing?" I said. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ben stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You deserve to know I'm sorry," and that broke something open. Not in me and them. Because for the first time they realized I wasn't going to quietly forgive. Not this time. After the dinner exploded, everyone left in waves. Quiet, confused, or just too awkward to make eye contact. Only my mother and I remained at the table. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. The turkey was cold. The pie untouched. She finally broke the silence. "I met Peter when I was 24. He was stationed in Boston. We were only together for a few months. I didn't interrupt. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to call. His number was disconnected. I assumed he'd been deployed, or didn't want to be found. A month later, James came back into my life. He offered stability. He offered to raise you, so you never told Peter I existed." I told myself I was protecting you. I looked at her flatly, but what you were really protecting was your version of the story. She didn't argue, and that was almost worse than denial. That night I packed up everything I'd collected: the DNA results, Peter Sloan's public profile, the letters I'd drafted and never sent. I knew I couldn't move forward without one thing: closure. Not from my mother. From him. So I wrote Peter a real letter, handwritten. Honest, scared. "Dear Peter, my name is Natalie Carter. I believe I'm your daughter. I found you through DNA results. I wasn't told about you. I was told you were gone. I've spent 25 years believing I came from someone who didn't want me, but I think maybe that was never true. If this letter reaches you, and if you're open to it, I'd like to meet with no expectations, just truth. Natalie. I mailed it the next morning, then waited. 2 weeks later, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize. Subject line, Natalie, my heart jumped. Inside was a message from Peter Sloan. Natalie, I got your letter. I've read it over and over again. I never knew if I had. I would have been there. I would have fought to be in your life. You have no idea how long I've waited for someone like you to walk into it. Please, let's meet. We agreed to meet halfway. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a quiet diner by the water. I wore a navy sweater, hands shaking. When he walked in, I saw myself in him instantly. The shape of his mouth, the way he scanned the room, even how he ordered coffee black with a splash of cream, just like I did. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his life after the military, his failed marriage, his rescue dog, his work as a wilderness medic. And when I asked if he ever thought about having children, he blinked, then smiled. I didn't think I'd get that lucky. We agreed to take things slow. No sudden declarations, just getting to know each other, but with every phone call, every weekend, walk, every shared silence, we began stitching something together. Not what was lost, but something new, something real. Peter didn't try to replace anyone. He never called himself my father, not once. He said it with his presence instead. The way he always picked up on the first ring. The way he remembered little things I'd said weeks before. The way he sent me a first aid kit. When I mentioned getting a cut at work, it was quiet care. The kind I didn't realize I'd craved until I got it. We started having lunch every other Sunday. He met Ben, who was still reeling from the revelation but supportive. He even came to one of my shifts and surprised me with coffee after a long night on the trauma floor. We didn't have decades of shared memories, but we had now, and I wasn't letting that go. My relationship with my mother changed. She apologized, more than once, but there was a distance she couldn't cross anymore. I didn't shut her out, but I didn't let her rewrite the story either. She wanted to move on. I needed to understand. And those two things don't live in the same room. We spoke occasionally, birthdays, holidays, but there were gaps now. Honest ones. James never reached out, and I didn't mind. Some silences don't need to be broken. The hardest part was Jessica, my younger cousin. She had looked up to me her whole life. When the truth came out, she asked me privately, "Why didn't they ever think you deserved to know?" I had no answer. And maybe that was the real heartbreak. It wasn't just about losing trust. It was knowing they never trusted me with the truth. But Peter did. From the moment I reached out, he gave me answers. Hard ones. Honest ones. Even when it was uncomfortable. And that meant more than any perfect family image ever could. One night, we sat at a lake house cabin Peter had rented for a weekend getaway. He looked at me quiet and asked, "Do you hate them?" For what they did, I thought about it. "No," I said. "But I'll never see them the same way again." "That's fair," he nodded. "You're not angry?" I asked. "Of course I am," he said. "But I got something. I never thought I'd have a daughter. And maybe that's all I need." I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen in my chest, like an anchor being pulled from the bottom of a lake. I was no longer tethered to their version of who I was. 1 year later, I stood in front of a small group at a DNA and identity support forum in Cambridge. There were 20 chairs, a coffee table with stale cookies, a few people clutching manila envelopes like they were made of glass. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I didn't come here because I wanted answers. I came because I deserved them. Heads nodded. I continued. The people who raised me lied. Not because they hated me, but because they were afraid of what the truth might mean. But what they didn't understand is that the truth doesn't break us. Silence does. Someone in the back sniffled. Another scribbled something into a notebook. I found my real father at 28. I didn't find closure. I found connection. And that changed everything. After the talk, a woman approached me, gray hair, shaking hands. She said, "I've been hiding the truth from my daughter for 30 years. I think it's time I stop." I hugged her, and I meant it. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a journal Peter gave me for my birthday. On the first page, I wrote, "Truth is not a weapon, it's a key. It doesn't punish, it frees. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Maybe there will be healing, maybe not. But I do know this. I know who I am now, and no one gets to rewrite that again. Have you ever uncovered a truth your family tried to bury? Drop your story in the comments. I'm listening. Vote. Team. Natalie, if you believe truth is always worth it, no matter how long it's been hidden. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more powerful stories of identity, resilience, and the kind of healing that starts with one simple question. Who am I really?